Hi guys, this is the video for Chapter 7, Lesson 2. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at turning percentages into fractions. In our last lesson, we talked about how a percentage is really just a number out of 100. And so when we're doing the reverse and turning a percentage into a fraction, all we have to do is write that percentage as that over 100. And we can also write it as a decimal by doing, 16 over 100 would be 0.16. So if we want to write our percentage into a decimal, there's actually a really easy trick to do that. Following the logic, where 16% equals 16 over 100, which ends up being 0.16, we can actually move our decimal over to the left by 2 and turn that into our decimal. So when we move our decimal over to the left, what we're doing is we're dividing it by multiples of 10. So for every spot we move it to the left, that's a multiple of 10. So if we move it over once, that's dividing by 10. Move it over twice, that's dividing over 100. Now, if you move a decimal to the right, if I did this, if I move it to the right, I'm multiplying by 10. So think of 16 times 10 is 160, right? Move it twice, it's multiplying by 100. So we can use this concept to apply it here with turning our percentages into a fraction. So in this case, a percentage turned into a decimal would be dividing by 100 because it's 16 over 100. Whereas if I wanted to turn a decimal into a fraction, or a decimal into a percentage, I'm multiplying by 100. So I'm going to multiply by 100, and that would be 9% there. So let's just double check this. Turning it into a decimal, divide by 100, move it over to the left, that's 0.11. Turning this into a decimal, 1, 2. So this becomes, that's where your decimal is, put a placeholder here. It's 0.002. Okay, turning a decimal into a percentage, well, we're going to multiply 100, right? So really it's like 0.3 out of 100, and we've got to multiply it to make this a whole number and make it a, 0.3 is actually out of 10, right? 0.3 or 3 out of 10. This would be 3 out of 10, and then we're multiplying it by another 10 to make it out of 100, right? So this would be moving over to the right, and that would be 30%. Over here, multiply by 100, 1, 2, that's 125 percentage. So write each percentage as a decimal. So really all you're doing is moving the decimal, which is really, really nice to do. Not too much work that is involved with this. So 1, 2, this is 0.12. 1, 2. This is 0.05. So think of this, you have a placeholder here that's a 0, 0.05. Move it over 1, 2. It's 0.17. Oh, I don't know why I put a percentage here. Doesn't need to go there. Let's jump down to this one. Moving our decimal 2 over, that's 1.5 as a decimal. Moving, let's do 7, okay? Moving over 2, put a decimal there. There's a placeholder, so it's 0.006. Now, I want you guys to put this 0 in front. Don't just put 0.05, because you guys, this decimal gets lost very easily. It's a tiny dot that gets lost. So like right here, I would prefer putting a 0 in front of that decimal, and then make that decimal pretty big and apparent. Okay, so try 4, 6, and 8 to work on those, and then I'll check in with you. So this is 0.72. This is 0.02, and this is 8.25. Okay, now doing the reverse, writing it as a percentage. So we're going to multiply everything by 100, right? So this becomes 30. We actually did this up top. This becomes 21%. This becomes, move it over 1, 2. This becomes 9%. Move this over 1, 2. This becomes 322.5%. Okay, work the rest out. See what you get for those. So this one's 65%. This one's 77.2%. This one is 0.15%. And this is 1%. Okay, so there you go, turning them into decimals. Now on the back, how do we change a fraction into a percentage? So here's the trick, guys. You can, of course, like we did before, try to multiply or make that equal to 100 over an amount and cross multiply and do all that like we did before. Another way of doing it is by simply getting your calculator out and dividing the numerator by the denominator. So if you do on your calculator 3 divided by 8, you are going to get a decimal. Now the decimal is 0.375. That's not the percentage. To turn this into a percentage, you're going to move your decimal over twice to the right, by basically you're multiplying by 100, and that would become your percentage. So you're combining what we did up top in our first page there with dividing this fraction. So some of you guys might have already done this. A lot of times when you get your test or your quiz or your homework back, you say, what percentage is this? I got 18 out of 20. Is this an A, or is this, is it A minus, A plus? Is it a B plus? What is this? I know it's high, but what is the percentage? So you can really solve that by doing 18 divided by 20. Get that as a decimal. That's 0.9. Multiply by 100 or move your decimal over twice, and that's 90%. So I don't know if you guys have been doing this in the past to figure out your percentage on stuff, but some of you have asked me, and I've told you, do the numerator divided by the denominator, and then whatever that decimal is, move over twice, right? So example B here, like we have a repeating decimal. So 5 divided by 9 is 0.5 repeating. Just write this as 55.6, round that number up, and then put it at one decimal place. If you wanted to write this as, 55.5 repeating percent, I would understand what you meant. But in this situation, if you see a repeating decimal, just round it to the nearest number, nearest tenth or 100th, okay? Okay, so taking a look here, a word problem. You did a survey in your school and found out that 19 out of 50 students prefer to text message, 29% prefer to email, and 0.33 prefer to talking on the phone. Which of these groups is the largest? So really, it's kind of hard to tell between the three because you've got a fraction, a percentage, and a decimal. So I would say turn them all into the same form. And the easiest form to distinguish what has a greater or lesser amount is by changing them all into percentages. So 19.50, do 19 over 50, do that divided by, do that numerator divided by the denominator and write it as a percentage. So this would be 38%. And then this one, you can just move over 0.33, move over your decimal, and that's 33%. And then you've got 29% here. So I think the group that preferred text message is the majority out of the three. There's a greater amount of students who like to text than email or talk on the phone. And so you can compare the three amounts there. Okay, so taking a look here, let's practice this. 33 divided by 40. 33 divided by 40. As a decimal, it's 0.825. And with this, I'm not too concerned. Well, I guess on your homework, I do want to see that you've turned it into a decimal and then moved your decimal over. So this would be 82.5%. I'm sorry, it's so hard to see my work right now. Let me zoom in. And this is a percentage. And then let's do 9 divided by 32. So work that out on your calculator. You know what, on this, on your homework, I don't need to see your work because most of it you're done on calculator anyway, so just write your answer down. So this would be 0.28125. Now this instruction says round to the nearest tenth. So to the nearest tenth means when I move my decimal over, I'm keeping this number, one number after the decimal. So this would be 28.1%. And I don't have to round up because this is a 2, which doesn't, that keeps it the same. Okay, 3 divided by 8 is 0.375. So this as a percentage is 37.5. Okay, I think you get the idea. So why don't you guys work out the rest, see what you get. I'm gonna write the answers up here. And I'll use black. I'll use different color. Maybe I'll use purple. Okay, so number 4, 275%. Number 5 is 437.5%. This is 20%. This one is 56%. And this is 44.1%. Okay, so word problem here. In a survey, there are 44% that voted for Mr. Johnson, 2/5 said they voted for Miss Smith, and 0.16 said they voted for Mr. Burns. So we want to compare who got the most votes. So turning this, well, we don't have to turn this into a percentage. So we've got 44% for Mr. Johnson. 2/5, let's change this into a percentage. So 2 divided by 5 is 0.4. Move that decimal over. That's 40%. And then we've got 0.16. Move that decimal over. That would be 16% for Mr. Burns. And so the largest, the person who got the most votes is Mr. Johnson. So we could say Mr. Johnson received the most votes, or he has the largest group of supporters. And then you're going to explain. Maybe with 44% of the supporters. And then you could say Miss Smith at 40% of the supporters, and Mr. Burns at 16% of the supporters. Right, so you're going to explain why he's the most. So make sure you explain it there on your work. But that's all. So I think this lesson's a little more simple than the previous one, but the previous one is important as well. And so on your homework, do it according to the lesson that I was taught in. So don't all just do it the same way where you're like, oh, I don't have to, I can just do it all this way. Divide it by with my calculator and then move my decimal. Just because you know one way doesn't mean you don't need to know the other way. So practice all the ways of finding fractions and decimals and percentages in your work.